The day Ty Borden's story ended on Heartland, the world of the show changed forever. Fans who had grown up with him, who had watched his struggles, his victories, and his love for Amy, felt like they had lost a friend. Questions filled the air. Why would Graham Wardle, the actor behind one of the most beloved characters, step away from the role that defined so much of Heartland? This was not just a simple decision. It was something deeper, something that spoke to life beyond the screen. To understand why Ty died, we first need to understand who Ty Borden was, and why his character meant so much to millions of viewers. When Heartland began, Ty Borden entered as a troubled young man with a heavy past. He was not the confident horse whisperer we came to love. He was a boy who had grown up in difficult circumstances, marked by pain and mistakes that seemed too heavy for his age. When Ty arrived at Heartland Ranch, he came as a probationary worker, someone given a second chance when most people had already written him off. This was the moment that changed not only his life, but also the lives of the Bartlett-Fleming family and the fans who watched him grow. From the very beginning, Ty was different. His quiet strength, his unspoken kindness, and his natural bond with horses made him stand out. At first, he was closed off, unsure of his place in the world, and even hesitant to believe in himself. But as the seasons moved forward, we watched him build trust with Jack, find respect from Lou, and most importantly, open his heart to Amy. His journey was not fast or easy. It was slow, sometimes frustrating, but always real. And that is why audiences connected to him so deeply. Ty was not perfect. He was human, and in his flaws, people found someone they could root for. What made Ty unforgettable was the way he transformed. He went from a young man running from his past to a husband, father, and hero. His love for Amy was central to the series, not just because it was romantic, but because it was healing. Together, Amy and Ty built a relationship that showed growth, sacrifice, and unconditional support. It wasn't a fairy tale. They faced struggles, dangers, and heartbreaks. But each time they fought through it, and that made their love story one of the strongest threads in Heartland. For many fans, Ty represented hope. He showed that people could change. He showed that no matter how broken someone's beginning might be, with patience, love, and trust, they could build a new life. And as we watched him grow into a husband and father, Ty became more than just a character. He was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that second chances are worth taking. This is why his departure was so shocking. After years of following his journey, after watching him build a life that seemed unshakable, the idea that it could all end felt unfair. But to understand why the writers and Graham Wardle made that choice, we first have to step back and see the man behind Ty, and the reasons that led him to take this difficult step. No one was ready for the moment Ty Borden's journey came to an end. For over a decade, viewers had seen him survive life-threatening challenges, from injuries to illnesses, always coming back stronger. That's why when the scene unfolded and Ty's death was revealed, it felt unreal, almost like a mistake. Fans waited for the twist, for the miracle, for the moment he would rise again as he had so many times before. But this time was different. This time, the goodbye was final. The exit was not loud or overdramatic. It was quiet, almost too quiet for a character who carried so much weight in the story. Ty had already faced a gunshot wound earlier in the series, and though he survived, it came back to haunt him. The complication from that injury eventually took his life, a reminder that even the strongest hearts cannot escape fate. The writers chose to portray his death in a way that reflected real life, sudden, shocking, and heartbreaking. And for fans, the simplicity of it made the pain even sharper. The silence after his death was not just inside the show. It echoed across households worldwide. Fans flooded social media with messages of disbelief and grief. Some said they cried as if they had lost someone close to them. Others admitted they could not keep watching the series because it felt too heavy without Ty. For many, Heartland without Ty seemed impossible. After all, he was one half of the love story that had become the heart of the show. His bond with Amy had carried the series through its brightest and darkest moments. Without him, it felt as though the center had broken. Yet, in that very heartbreak, the show delivered a truth that resonated with viewers. Life is unpredictable. We don't always get warnings. We don't always get to prepare. And in that way, Ty's death mirrored the reality of loss. It taught audiences that grief comes suddenly and leaves behind silence that is hard to fill. For Amy, for Lindy, and for the entire family on Heartland, the hole Ty left became the new challenge to face. But the question that lingered most was not only how the characters would go on, it was why Graham Wardle made the decision to leave at all. What could drive an actor to step away from a role that millions adored? A role that had defined a major part of his career. As painful as Ty's departure was, the answer lay in Graham's own personal journey. One that went beyond scripts and cameras, into a deeper calling he could no longer ignore. Behind the cameras, away from the rolling fields and horses of Heartland, Graham Wardle was fighting with a quiet truth of his own. For years, he had poured himself into Ty Borden, giving fans a character who grew from a boy searching for belonging into a man who embodied love and strength. But as the season stretched on, Graham began to feel something stirring inside him. It was not about the money, the fame, or even the comfort of a steady role. It was about purpose. In interviews and on his podcast, Graham explained that life had started pulling him in a different direction. He felt called to explore parts of himself that could not be reached while standing on the same set year after year. For him, continuing as Ty meant safety. And while safety is comforting, it can also be limiting. Graham wanted growth. He wanted challenge. He wanted to step into the unknown. To him, saying goodbye to Ty was not about abandoning fans. It was about answering a deeper voice that told him it was time to move forward. He described it as a spiritual decision, one rooted in faith and in trust that life had more for him beyond the show. Graham believed that when we ignore those inner callings, we deny ourselves the chance to discover who we truly are. Heartland had been his home, his family, and his creative world for 14 seasons. But he knew staying too long could keep him from becoming who he was meant to be. That is why, even though it broke hearts, including his own, he chose to walk away. What makes Graham's choice powerful is that it mirrors the very themes Heartland taught its fans. The show was always about change, growth, and second chances. Just like Ty faced crossroads in his life, Graham faced one in his career. And just like Ty had to take risks to heal and build a future, Graham had to risk leaving behind something beautiful to discover something new. For fans, it was difficult to separate the actor from the character. Graham's decision to leave felt like Ty's death in real life. But in truth, it was the opposite. It was not the end of Graham. It was the beginning of him choosing authenticity over comfort. He stepped into a new chapter where he could create, reflect, and share in ways that were true to his soul. And yet, this decision carried a ripple effect. It changed the course of Heartland forever. It reshaped Amy's story, challenged the writers, and tested the loyalty of fans. The shock of Ty's absence was real, but it was born from a choice that Graham believed was necessary for his own life. To understand the full impact, we have to see not only what Ty's death did to the characters, but also how it changed the show and the fans who held on to his memory. When Ty Borden's story ended, Heartland itself changed. The show that had once carried the warmth of love, family, and second chances now carried something heavier: grief. Ty was not just another character in the background. He was a pillar of the series, and without him, every storyline felt different. His absence created a silence that echoed through every corner of the ranch, through every member of the Bartlett-Fleming family, and through every viewer sitting at home. For Amy, Ty's death was not just the loss of her husband. It was the loss of her partner in every sense. He had been her balance, her strength, the one person who stood beside her through danger, heartbreak, and triumph. Without him, Amy was forced into a new role, a single mother, raising their daughter Lindy, while also trying to hold on to her own identity. This shift reshaped the very center of Heartland. No longer was the story about a couple growing together. It became the story of Amy learning to stand on her own, guided by memories and love that still lingered. Fans felt this change deeply. Social media became a sea of heartbreak. Some viewers confessed that they had to pause the show for months, unable to move past the weight of Ty's loss. Others admitted that continuing to watch was painful, yet they did so because Heartland had always been about resilience. Even in grief, the show carried a message. Life goes on, even when we wish it wouldn't. But this wasn't just a fictional lesson. For many fans, Ty's death mirrored real experiences. It reminded them of people they had lost, of sudden goodbyes, of pain they were still carrying. Heartland, once a comfort, now felt like a mirror of reality, forcing people to confront emotions they often tried to bury. And in that painful reflection, the show found a deeper truth. It no longer simply entertained. It healed by showing that grief is not the end of love. It is the proof of it. Still, the impact was not without struggle. Some fans felt betrayed, arguing that the writers should have kept Ty alive, that the series lost its heart with his departure. Others admired the boldness, seeing in it the courage to show life as it truly is, unpredictable, fragile, and fleeting. This divide created one of the most emotional turning points in Heartland's history. For the writers and cast, Ty's death meant rebuilding the story from the ground up. New dynamics had to be written, new themes had to emerge. Heartland became less about romance and more about survival, about holding on to family when life tries to tear it apart. And through it all, the shadow of Ty remained, not as a ghost, but as a memory that pushed every character forward. What made this impact so unique was that it extended beyond the screen. Viewers around the world shared their grief with each other, finding comfort in a community of fans who understood the same pain. Heartland became more than a show. It became a shared experience of loss and resilience. And while Ty's story had ended, Graham Wardle's choice to leave had opened a new path for everyone. The characters, the fans, and the series itself. When Graham Wardle closed the chapter on Heartland, many assumed he was stepping away from the spotlight. But in truth, he wasn't walking away from storytelling. He was choosing to tell stories in a different way. Leaving behind a role as loved as Ty Borden could have been the end for some actors. But for Graham, it became the beginning of something more personal and meaningful. One of the first paths he followed was into the world of podcasting. He launched Time Has Come, a space where he could sit down with people from all walks of life and dive into conversations about purpose, growth, and transformation. Unlike scripted television, these talks weren't rehearsed or guided by directors. They were raw, honest, and vulnerable. Graham was no longer playing a character. He was sharing himself, and in doing so, he invited his audience into a different kind of story, one that was real. Beyond the podcast, Graham began exploring creative avenues that allowed him to stretch beyond the limits of acting. He spoke about wanting to inspire others, about using his voice to encourage people to listen to their inner callings just as he had. Whether through public talks, creative writing, or simply living more authentically, his focus shifted from entertainment to impact. He wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing truth. For fans, seeing Graham beyond Ty was both strange and inspiring. Some struggled at first. How do you separate the actor from the character you've loved for so long? But as Graham continued to share pieces of his journey, it became clear that he was living the very lessons Heartland had always taught: courage, growth, and the bravery to step into the unknown. Perhaps what makes his life after Heartland so unique is that he didn't abandon the fans who supported him. He carried them with him. His gratitude for the Heartland community was always present. In his messages and podcasts, he acknowledged the pain his departure caused. But he also encouraged fans to see it as a reminder that change, though difficult, can open doors we never imagined. Graham's journey after Heartland wasn't about leaving Ty behind. It was about honoring him. The strength, the growth, and the hope that Ty symbolized didn't disappear with the show. They became part of Graham's mission to inspire in new ways. Just as Ty transformed from a troubled teen into a man who gave love freely, Graham transformed from an actor bound to a role into a man creating his own path. And while this new path took him away from the familiar ranch we all knew, it led him toward something universal: the search for meaning. In that sense, his story didn't end with Heartland. It simply changed shape, reminding fans everywhere that endings are often the start of something greater. There comes a moment in every story when the pages turn, whether we are ready or not. For Heartland, that moment was Ty's death. For Graham Wardle, it was the choice to walk away. On the surface, it looked like loss, like something precious had been taken away. But if you look closer, you see it differently. You see that both Ty and Graham were part of a larger truth. That endings are not the final word. They are bridges to something new. Ty's journey will always live in the hearts of fans. His love for Amy, his growth from a broken boy into a man of strength, his devotion to family. These are not erased by his death. They remain etched into the fabric of Heartland and carried in every fan who watched him. Characters die, but legacies live on. And Ty's legacy is not one of tragedy. It is one of transformation. He showed that people can heal, that love can change a life, and that even the hardest pasts can give way to hopeful futures. That story did not die with him. It continues in Amy, in Lindy, and in every viewer who found strength in his struggles. For Graham, the decision to leave was his own version of Ty's story. Just as Ty had to risk his heart to grow, Graham had to risk his career to honor his truth. His choice reminds us that courage does not always mean staying. Sometimes, the greatest courage is found in walking away, in trusting that the unknown has more to teach us than the familiar. It is not an easy lesson for fans to accept, but it is a powerful one. Change is part of life, and without it, we do not grow. The beauty of this reflection is that it binds fiction and reality together. Ty's death taught fans to face loss, while Graham's journey teaches them to face change. Both lessons are painful, both ask for acceptance, but both leave behind gifts, memories, inspiration, and the reminder that we carry the people and characters we love with us long after they're gone. In the end, Ty Borden's story was never just about a man on a ranch. It was about resilience, second chances, and the quiet strength found in love. And Graham Wardle's story is not just about leaving a role. It is about listening to that inner voice that tells us where we need to go next. Together, they remind us that though chapters close, the story continues, always unfolding in ways we do not expect. Stories like Ty's don't just end when the screen fades to black. They live on in the people who carried them, in the lessons they gave, and in the emotions they stirred. For so many fans, Ty was more than a character. He was a friend, a teacher, a reminder that growth is possible even when life feels broken. And for Graham Wardle, leaving Heartland was not a goodbye to us, but a reminder to follow our own paths with courage, even when they lead us into the unknown. Now, the question becomes yours. What did Ty's journey mean to you? Did you see pieces of yourself in his struggles, or find hope in the way he built love and family despite his past? Share your thoughts and your stories, because this is more than a television show. It is a community bound by the emotions it awakened in us. If Ty's legacy touched you, if Graham's decision to walk his own road inspires you, let your voice be heard in the comments. Share your memories, share your grief, share your gratitude. This conversation is not only about the end of a character, but about what his story continues to teach us long after. And if you want to keep walking this road with us, exploring the stories behind Heartland, the people who shaped it, and the lessons it left behind, make sure you join this journey by subscribing and staying connected. Together, we can keep Ty's memory alive and honor Graham's choice to live authentically by continuing to seek meaning in our own lives. Because in the end, Heartland is not just a show. It is a reminder that love, loss, and growth are part of every story, including yours. And the story doesn't end here. It continues with us, with you, with the legacy we carry forward.